Hi everyone, I am Jinhyun from the University of Hong Kong. In this presentation, I will explain our work on anisotropic creep in shale gas reservoir rocks with a focus on the impacts of constitutive behavior on field scale deformations. This work is from collaboration with Semnani from UC San Diego, Josh White from Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and Hiroki Sone from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Shale is central to many subsurface technologies. A well-known example is source rocks in unconventional energy resources, such as shale gas and shale oil. And shale also plays an important role in the storage of CO2 or other hazardous materials into deep undergrounds because they provide sealing systems. It is well known that shale deformation is anisotropic and viscoplastic. As an example, here I'm showing experimental data from Sone and Zobak. So this experimental data is about creep strain, which means that these strains developed under constant stress conditions. And here you can see that even under constant stress, the shale develops its strain. So this means that shale behavior is viscoplastic. And the axial creep strain and the lateral strain are often different in both direction and magnitude. And this is the same for Barnett Shale and Haynesville Shale. And here's another experimental data from Sone and Zoba. And you can see that this is an axial strain, which means that this is strain, instantaneous strain plus creep strain. And you can see that unlike aluminum alloy, which does not show any strain over time, shale shows significant strain over time, which again confirms viscoplastic behavior. And here you can see that the strain developed differently for vertically coarse sample denoted by V and horizontally coarse sample denoted by H, even under almost the same differential pressure. And you can also see that these behaviors are different for different shales. And so this illustrates that shale is anisotropic, and such anisotropic and viscoplastic characteristics can depend on specific shale types. Then what are the origins of this shale anisotropy and viscoplasticity? The answer is their microstructure. Shale anisotropy is due to its layered microstructure. Here I'm showing an example optical log of core from the Green River Shale Formation over about 100 feet. And you can see that throughout this core, shale shows continuously layered structure, which is repeated over its depth. So because of this layered structure, shale inherently shows anisotropy, specifically transverse isotropy. And shale viscoplasticity is due to its soft components. Shale is a composite of hard constituents and soft constituents, and the hard ones include quartz feldspar pyrite, which are often denoted as QFP, and carbonates. And soft constituents include clay and organics, and kerogen is a typical example of organic matter in shale. And it is the soft components that drive viscoplastic deformation in shale. This has been confirmed by many experimental studies, and here is one example by Rybacki et al., in which creep strain is correlated by clay contents. And more recently, Slim et al. Studied the role of organic matter in creep from nanoscale to a microscale. So these results suggest that we can leverage the shale's microstructure to model its anisotropic and viscoplastic behavior. But how to? We can use homogenization of microstructure. Concretely, we can assume that shale has a bi-layer unit-cell structure. So here is a typical shale considered a continuum for field scale analysis. And it has a representative element volume or unit cell. And here we have assumed that the unit cell has a bi-layer structure composed of a soft layer and hard layer, as described in a previous slides. So this unit cell has layer structure with explicitly defined bedding plane with normal vector n, whose angle is given by theta. So if we use this, we have to solve a macro scale problem, which is the standard problem in continuum mechanics, after solving the micro scale problem for this bi-layer structure. So this is how we homogenize the micro scale problem, and it's also two-scale, multi-scale approach. So more specifically, we solve the micro scale problem, which consists of three coupled governing equations, namely traction discontinuity in the soft layer, traction discontinuity in the hard layer, and the periodicity of micro displacements. Once we solve this micro scale problem, we obtain the macro stress, which corresponds to the standard stress in a single scale model. And this macro stress enters the standard governing equation, which is linear momentum balance or equilibrium in static condition. So this approach provides a multi-scale constitutive framework for Shale. The upshot of this approach is that anisotropic behavior naturally emerges from the assumed layered microstructure. So this allows us to use isotropic constitutive models from linear elasticity to many conventional plasticity model for individual layers. More detail of the homogenization approach can be found from this paper, which developed a general framework. And then we have also specialized the framework to Shale viscoplasticity in this paper published in this year. So here we have to choose specific constitutive models. And for the soft layer comprised of clay and organics, we introduced a viscoplastic modified chemically model because this soft layer is mainly responsible for the viscoplastic behavior. Whereas for the hard layer composed of QFP and carbonates, we simply use linear elasticity because there's no viscoplastic deformation in these materials. Please note that one can use different models for these layers, and this is just our choice. But we will show that this choice will reproduce real behavior. So here we calibrate and validate the model. For that purpose, we use experimental data from triaxial creep tests on 3 US shale gas reservoir rocks conducted by Sone and Zobak. And the 3 rocks are as follows: Haynesville Shale, Eagle Ford Shale, and Barnett Shale. And these 3 shale samples were tested using the same protocol. Firstly, applying an isotropic confinement pressure and wait for approximately 3 hours. And then apply a differential pressure. And then keep the differential pressure constant for about 3 hours and measure creep deformation during this constant differential pressure stage. So let's first consider Haynesville case. So in this experimental data, Sone used vertically cored sample and measured axial and lateral strains during the creep stage. And here is the test condition. And these are the parameters we calibrated. And here is the result in which experimental data and model results are compared. And you can see that our model will reproduce the shale creep behavior, almost the same as the experimental data in both axial and lateral directions. Our next example is Eagle Ford Shale. So for the Eagle Ford Shale, Sone used vertically cored and horizontally cored samples. So here is the test condition. So the 2 samples were tested in a slightly different pressures. And here are the material parameters calibrated. And we can see that, again, our model can well reproduce the creep behavior for the both vertical and horizontal core samples. And our last example is Barnett Shale. So this is a horizontally coarse sample, and its axial and lateral strains were measured during clip stage. And this is the test condition. And again, here are the material parameters calibrated. So here I'm showing experimental data along with the model results in terms of creep strain. And you can see that, again, our model can well reproduce the experimental data in terms of both axial and lateral strains. So based on these three sets of material parameters, we are now addressing the question of how do these differences in constitutive behavior control shear deformation in field practices? For that purpose, we consider an example problem of borehole closure, which has important implications in many environmental and energy geotechnologies. So in essence, we drill a borehole, and because of viscoplastic behavior, it will show time-dependent deformation, squeezing deformation. So for this simulation, we use the three different sets of parameters that I just explained. And to isolate the impact of constitutive behavior, we kept the hydraulic parameters the same with an isotropic permeability of 10 to the minus 18 square meter. And we consider three different bedding plane directions, namely 0 degree, 45 degree, and 90 degree from the horizontal. And in what follows, I will present borehole deformation after 1 year. Here are borehole deformation behavior after 1 year. And the three are simulated by different material parameters calibrated to Haynesville and Eaglefold and Barnett shales. And the contour shows equivalent plastic strain in %. And you can see that all the results show squeezing deformation, but the deformation pattern is not symmetric because of the bedding plane. In other words, because of the anisotropy. And the specific deformation pattern manifests a little bit differently. And especially for Haynesville shale, we can see the pattern is like breakout behavior. And also the plastic strain developed much more intensely than others. So this suggests that although the general qualitative pattern may be similar for shale, which is anisotropic and viscoplastic, but their specific patterns and quantitative results can be quite different according to specific constitutive behavior. And when we change the bedding plane to 45 degree, you can see that the deformation pattern also rotates accordingly. And that's also for the 90 degree. So we can confirm that this difference, this behavior is really due to anisotropy, but their specific results can be quite different by constitutive behavior. So here is a summary. Layered microstructure homogenization is an efficient approach to constitutive modeling of anisotropic and viscoplastic deformation of shale. And this was already explained in our paper. And in this particular work, we have integrated lab test data, constitutive modeling, and numerical simulation to show that viscoplastic behavior of shale at the constitutive level controls time-dependent deformation in field practices. And our results highlight that constitutive behavior and its modeling are critical to site-specific analysis of shale deformation. And more details of this work is found from our ARMA paper. Thank you very much for your attention.